Paul Rykoff back on that because, hey, he's our resident independent, if you will, the Independent Americans podcast. And this is your state where independents can really make a difference. We'll put up the headline on independent voters in New Hampshire with a quote from today's New York Times. And the quote reads as follows. Ms. Haley's been slowly building a base in New Hampshire, buttressed by more than $22 million in broadcast advertising, as well as the endorsement of Americans for Prosperity Action. So she has the money. Does she have the support from independents who cross over and vote in this Republican primary? What do you think?
It looks like she does. I mean, she's 6 points behind Trump in New Hampshire right now in most of the recent polling. And independents are extremely influential. And New Hampshire is a bit reflective of the general population. The biggest group of people who are voting in New Hampshire are not Democrats or Republicans. They're independents. About 39% of the registered voters in New Hampshire are independents. And then you got about 29% to 30% are Republican and about 30% Democrats. So
what do they like about her, independents?
I think they like that she's more moderate. I think they view that she's independent. I think she's a newer voice, but they're going to vote with their gut. They're going to vote with their conscience. They're going to vote on the issues. And I think in general, we find that they're more moderate. And I think more and more people in this country are viewing Biden on one side, Trump on the other, and looking for opportunities in the middle.
Those are the type of people who tell the pollsters, we don't want either one. We don't want to see a Biden versus Trump rematch, or maybe they're Republicans who are, quote unquote, anti-Trump. To that point about the Trump voter, these are kind of interesting comments that came today. I don't know if you saw them from Jamie Dimon, who's one of the most powerful business people in the entire world, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, talking about Trump voters and, you know, how people should treat and look at Trump voters and why they vote for Donald Trump. Here's Jamie Dimon. Let's listen.
When people say MAGA, they're actually looking at people voting for Trump, and they think they're voting, and they're basically scapegoating them, that you are like him. But I don't think they're voting for Trump because of his family values. Now, if you look, just take a step back, be honest. He was kind of right about NATO, kind of right about immigration. He grew the economy quite well.
China virus.
Tax reform worked. He was right about some of China.
So, as an interview, obviously, on CNBC that was over Davos earlier today. So he says these people look at it and see Trump as being right on the issues and aren't looking at the character, aren't thinking about January 6th, I suppose. But the larger point he's trying to make is that people shouldn't denigrate those people. They should have conversations with them and think about why they're doing what they're doing. Your thoughts?
I think he's right. I think we have to try to understand each other, especially now when people are so divided. And I think some people vote for the man, some people vote for the issues, some people vote because they don't like the other person, which is where independents often fall in. It's not necessarily that they want one or the other. They want none of the above, and they're left with who they like the least. And I think that's ultimately, again, why independents are going to determine this election. 49% of the country is independent. A few thousand independents in a few swing states are likely going to determine our next president. And those are folks at the end of the day that may vote on issues and look at which candidate is going to nail it for them.
Yeah, not necessarily character. I mean, they do a little bit of both.
I think over time, the character issues, the trials are catching up with Trump. I think someone like Nikki Haley will definitely appeal to independents more in a general election, but we're not talking about a general election. Right now, we're talking about the GOP primary, and that's where Trump is very strong.
Because it's a binary choice, right, when you get to the general election, and then people are thinking back on who Trump was, what Trump did, what January 6th was like, I suppose, in addition to these other issues, because Jamie Dimon's right. The other Trump supporters will come on. We've had a lot of them on that will say, oh, well, you know, the first 2 years of his presidency, the economy was in good shape and all these types of things. And they're willing to look past that. A lot of people are anti-Trump, just do not understand that mindset.
And I think Nikki Haley's attractiveness and part of why she's doing well in New Hampshire is I'm the same on all the issues without all the baggage. And I think there are people in New Hampshire that are responding to that, and I think there are people across the country who are responding to that. Whether or not it's enough Republicans to tip the nomination to her is the question, and it's probably not.
It's probably not, but it might be, right? She'd have to win New Hampshire outright. That seems to be the thinking, and then the race changes before South Carolina. But that's a lot of ifs. Do you think there's any chance that she could do it?
There's a chance. I think her best showing will likely be in New Hampshire. It'll probably be downhill from there. This is her chance to go all in and take the biggest shot she can get because of the independents. That is the deciding factor in New Hampshire. And for her right now, I think it's all in on New Hampshire.
All right, we'll see how many, not crossover, but participate in the Republican primary, you know, with no officially sanctioned Democratic primary up there this year, which is another story. All right, Paul, as always, thank you. We appreciate it very much.